Hey, welcome. When we think about peace, we often picture that one moment. A treaty gets signed, the fighting stops, but the truth is, that's just the beginning. Today, we're going to dig into why building a peace that actually lasts is so much harder and more complicated than it looks.
I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? A country goes through all this effort to end a conflict, and then, a few years later, sometimes even just months later, it all falls apart. So what's going wrong? What's the missing ingredient for a peace that actually sticks? That's what we're going to unpack. I mean, think about it. Billions of dollars get poured into peacekeeping and peacebuilding operations every single year. And yet, for so many people around the world, a real lasting peace, what some people call positive peace, feels completely out of reach. The risk of sliding back into war is just incredibly high because, well, just stopping the shooting doesn't fix what caused the fight in the first place. All right, so where do we even begin? Let's start with step one. The best way to think about this is like you're building a house. You would never ever build a brand new house on a rotten, crumbling foundation, would you? Of course not. It's the exact same for a society. Before you can even dream of building a peaceful future, you have to deal with the wreckage of the past. This quote, right here, it just gets straight to the point. When crimes go unpunished and suffering is ignored, that stuff doesn't just vanish. No, it festers. It turns into the grievances that will fuel the next round of violence. So ignoring the past, it's literally setting yourself up for failure. So how exactly does a society do that? How do you face your own history? Well, there's a name for this whole process. It's called transitional justice. And it's not just one single thing, it's more like a whole toolkit of strategies. It's how a society makes a conscious choice to look its own past in the eye, all of it, and figure out how to move forward without making the same mistakes all over again. And you can really break transitional justice down into four key pillars that hold up that new foundation. First up, you've got truth. Things like truth commissions that create an official, shared history of what really happened. Second, there's justice, actually prosecuting the people responsible. Third, reparations, which is all about compensating victims and restoring their dignity. And finally, the fourth pillar, guarantees of non-recurrence. That means fixing the broken systems, like the police or the courts, so this can never, ever happen again. Okay, so we've used transitional justice to clear the foundation. It's a clean slate. But now comes a huge question, maybe the question. Who gets to design the new house? Who decides what the country's future is going to look like? This brings us to the second essential piece to the puzzle. And the tool for that is something called a national dialogue. Now, the most important words on this slide are broad range of stakeholders. This isn't just about the generals and the politicians. This is a process to bring everybody to the table. We're talking civil society groups, religious leaders, community activists, to have a real say in where their country goes next. And you can really see why this is so critical when you compare it to the old way of doing things. For decades, peace was all about elite negotiations, a few powerful men in a room cutting a deal. It's top-down, exclusive, and usually pretty fragile. National dialogues completely flip that. They're bottom-up, they're inclusive, and the peace that comes out of them is way more likely to last because people actually feel like they own it. It's their peace. And if you want proof that this isn't just a nice idea, just look at Tunisia. Seriously, after their revolution in 2011, the country was careening towards civil war. But you know who saved the day? Not the politicians. It was four civil society groups: a union, a trade group, a human rights league, and the Lawyers Association. They started a national dialogue, forced the politicians to the table, and hammered out a deal that led to a new constitution. They even won the Nobel Peace Prize for it. It's an absolutely incredible example of peace building from the ground up. So, we've got our foundation of justice. We've got our inclusive blueprint from a national dialogue. Everything should be perfect, right? We're good to go? Well, not so fast. There is a huge and often totally invisible structural flaw that can bring the entire house crashing down if we're not paying attention. And this quote from Beth Speak just nails it. For so long, the whole conversation has been about how women can be a resource to help make peace. But that totally misses the point. The real transformative question we have to ask is this: what is this peace process going to do for women? Is it actually going to change the unequal power structures that put them in harm's way to begin with? And look, the scale of this exclusion is just staggering. Take a look at this number. Since 1992, despite all the talk, fewer than 10% of the people at the negotiating table have been women. Less than 1 in 10. That means half the population is just systematically shut out of the rooms where the entire future of their country is being decided. So it's really important to get the difference between these two approaches. On one hand, you've got what's called the instrumentalist approach. And honestly, it's pretty superficial. It's about adding women and stirring, just ticking a box. But on the other hand, you have the transformative approach, which goes so much deeper. It says that patriarchy itself, the whole system of male dominance, is a root cause of conflict, and a real peace has to actively tear down those unequal structures. It asks that powerful question, what can peace do for women?
And this really shows you how even the best intentions can get watered down. I mean, even the huge, landmark UN resolution on this, number 1325, has been criticized because it's lost its teeth. It was supposed to be radical, to challenge power, but in many places, it's just become another bureaucratic report filing exercise that doesn't lead to real change for women on the ground. Okay, so let's take these three big ideas: facing the past with transitional justice, shaping the future with inclusive dialogue, and looking at everything through a gender transformative lens, and see how this all works, or doesn't work, in the real world. For this, let's look at Guatemala. It's a really sobering story, but it is such an important lesson. See, back in 1996, their peace process looked amazing on paper. It was praised for being super inclusive, and it even had specific sections on protecting women's rights. But you fast forward to today, and Guatemala has one of the highest rates of femicide, the targeted murder of women, in the entire world. That's the paradox we have to understand.
So you had these successes on paper, women's groups were at the table, and there was even this landmark court case called Ceasefire that convicted former soldiers for using sexual slavery as a weapon of war. But in practice, so many of the key agreements were just never implemented. The war criminals mostly walked free. And that culture of impunity created a situation where violence against women was allowed to continue and in many ways get even worse.
And that right there is the huge lesson from Guatemala. It proves without a doubt that just putting the right words in a treaty isn't nearly enough. If you don't follow through with actual justice, and if you don't transform the deep-rooted beliefs and structures in a society that make violence acceptable, then the peace you build will be hollow. So, after going through all of this, what's the blueprint? How do we actually build a peace that can survive? It really boils down to three pillars that all have to work together. If you want a peace that's going to last, you need three things. First, you need transitional justice to courageously face the past. Second, you need an inclusive dialogue so that every single part of society has a say in the future. And third, you need to apply a gendered transformative lens to everything, to actively dismantle the inequalities that help cause conflict in the first place. These aren't optional extras. They are all absolutely essential. Because at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. A peace treaty, that's just a piece of paper. Real, living peace is a structure. It's something you have to build, piece by piece, on an unshakable foundation of justice for the past, inclusion for the present, and true equality for the future. And that kind of leaves us with one final thing to think about. It's easy to see when a war is over, but what does the presence of justice actually look like and feel like? In our own communities, in our own countries, what steps do we need to take to get beyond just an absence of fighting and start building a society where everyone, truly everyone, has a chance to thrive? Thanks for joining me.